Lord Mortis brought me bread.
Oh, nice.
Bread from the rice cooker.
Bread from the rice cooker.
Do you also make rice in the bread cooker?
I need to get a bread cooker so I can make some rice in the bread cooker.
You know, the thing is, if you've got a rice cooker, why would you need a bread cooker? You'll never use the bread cooker.
Yeah, because I've got bread in the rice cooker.
You've got the bread. There's no need to do. Hello and welcome to this special bonus episode of Because Language, a show about linguistics, the science of language. I'm Daniel Midgley, and with me now, she's a linguist, a podcaster, and according to ChatGPT, she might also be a cast member on The Witcher. It's Hedvig Hurgård.
Oh my god! It said that?
Yep, I did that thing where you look yourself up. What is Hedvig Hurgård primarily known for? And it said Hedvig Hurgård is primarily known for her role as the character Ciri in the Netflix series The Witcher. And it's not. It's actually Freya Allen. It's not an actor with the same name at all.
Our names.
Totally different.
I would have thought if I'd been mistaken, like the Skarsgårds.
Oh, yeah. I mean, something like that.
The Alexander Skarsgård, blah, blah, blah. Like, that would be a reasonable mistake. Hurgård Skarsgård.
Yes.
Nah. Oh, that's funny.
On the plus side, you are apparently a fan favorite among viewers of the show.
Hooray!
We've no Ben today. Ben has been called up for a very important meeting, which is a thing that happens, and we miss him. But we do have our very special guest who brings us so many great news stories, so many words of the week, and so many suggestions. We decided, well, it's time to just get her to curate this entire show. It's PharaohKatt.
Hello, good morning. Well, it's actually late afternoon, but never mind.
It's morning for Hedvig.
Good morning, Hedvig.
Thank you. Good morning. I also want to institute a thing where, like, there's a greeting for the first time you meet someone.
Oh.
What is...
English needs that. Like when someone's not new, but they're new to you, which is another thing English needs.
Well, like, per 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Per 24 hours, the first time you meet your colleague at work, if it's past 12, you can, I guess, just say hello. That's a boring solution.
Well, you could go formal the first time, and then after that, it's like, hey.
Yeah, I want a good morning, but good first time I see you today.
Good first time we see you. I think we should talk about this a different time.
We should.
PharaohKatt, you are a newly minted speech and language pathologist, or as we say, a speechie.
Correct.
You've been a long-time supporter of the show, and you're the reason that I know how to spell the word pharaoh.
I did go through a bit of an Egyptian phase in my childhood, and that name has kind of stuck.
Very good. Do you have a mnemonic for spelling it? Or, like, I have a trick that I have to use every time, but do you have a trick?
I just learnt it by rote, and I just say it by rote. What's your trick?
Hedvig, do you have a trick, or do you just get it wrong every time?
Well, I don't say it in English that much, so I try and remember Swedish, and I get confused, and I rely on spell checkers.
Sounds good. My trick is that there's an ARA in the middle. It's symmetrical. And so if you can remember that it's PH, and then there's that ARA, and then what's left? Well, an O and an H. So that's my trick.
There you go.
Oh, in English, you don't pronounce the second A, do you?
No, it's just pharaoh. Oh, you know how it is with those vowels.
Yeah, we do. Pharaoh.
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 I like it. We did, but we decided it was just too much work, and we said, forget it. We'll say the other A.
Pharaoh,
That's fine. Are you looking up on spell check how to spell pharaoh?
No, I'm not. I'm drinking I'm not doing anything. My hands are...
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to remember how Swedish works.
Fair.
That's fine.
Fair.
Okay.
Since we've got a speechy here, we wanted to just ask you a ton of questions about your profession. Does that sound all right?
Yes, let's do it.
Before we do that, though, this is a message to all you patrons listening to this bonus episode. Thank you for being patrons. You're supporting the show. You're helping us have fun while talking about good language science. So thank you very much. Why not come and join us on Discord if you're not already? All patrons can, no matter what level. And if you're listening later, once this episode goes public and you're not a patron, why don't you sign up and become one? There's lots of bonuses here. Bonus episodes, yearly mail out, Discord access, depending on your level. That's at patreon.com/becauselangpod. All right. So, first question. Do you like the term speechy, or is that not a very good term for someone who is a speech language pathologist?
So the thing with speech language pathologists is there are so many terms to describe us.
I know.
So you'll hear SLT, SLP, SLTP, like just speech language therapist, speech language pathologist, speech pathologist. There's so many. In Australia, we tend to go with speech pathologist, but it does get really, really fraught. So if you're ever confused, just say speechy. It's nice and short.
Okay. Why is it
Speechy.
fraught? What's fraught about it?
So there's this kind of feeling that the terms that we're using have some sort of impact on the way people are going to see us in our profession. And then it's just, is there a difference or is it the same? And it's just confusing. So no, just call us a speechy. It's nice and short. And as Australians, we like to shorten things.
It's very Aussie.
It's very Aussie.
Well, speech and language therapy is a pretty big umbrella. What's your area of focus within SLP?
If you want to know the full term that I get, it's CPSP, which is clinical practicing speech pathologist.
Oh wow! Okay,
yeah, I get two postnominals. I get MASP, which is Master of Speech Pathology, and I get CPSP. So
I did not see that C coming, to be honest.
Yeah, clinical practicing speech pathologist, and that's the difference between someone who's in the field and someone who's, I guess lapsed. Yeah, they've got the training, but they aren't up to date.
Okay.
What does that mean for like what you do day to day? Because I think I and maybe a lot of people listening think that you go to schools and help children who are struggling to pronounce their R's or J's or something. Is that what you do?
That is one of the things I could do. What is your understanding of what a speech pathologist does?
Great question.
I happened to take classes with speech pathologists in Sweden because they had to take intro to phonetics and we had to take intro to phonetics. And they were like, why don't you guys just take intro to phonetics together? My understanding is that, and we call them speech pedagogues.
Huh.
The speech teacher.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'd call them that. Fuck. Anyway, my understanding is that some people have anatomical difficulties, like maybe that string under their tongue is a bit taut, or like there's like, what's it called when you have a little gap?
Cleft palate?
Yeah, cleft palate or something. That means that the way that everyone else pronounces sounds is not going to work, and they might need to find an alternative route to pronounce sounds. So like when everyone else puts their tongue like that, you need to put your tongue a little bit like this, and then we make a sound that's like almost that. And they try and help people produce speech in a way that other people will understand it, but not like correcting. They're not grammar Nazis.
No, we're definitely not grammar Nazis. So there's actually two broad areas of practice within speech pathology. Area one is communication. So this is all of our language stuff. This is helping someone with their speech sounds. This is fluency or stuttering. It could be relearning to speak post-stroke. It could be learning to use an alternate communication method if, verbal words aren't for you. That's area one. Area two is feeding and swallowing. So the way that it was always described to me is we look at the neck up. So all of the muscles that you use to speak are the same muscles and cranial nerves that you use to eat. So if somebody has had a stroke and they've lost some of their functioning in their mouth and they can't swallow properly, we'll do reviews, we'll do rehabilitation, we'll do dietary changes to make things easier to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
But we also help anyone who has a swallowing difficulty. So that could be someone with a tongue tie or a cleft palate who might need an alternate way to get nutrition.
That's really interesting because we're one of the stupid primates, right, that can choke on food, right? Because like you said, like we have like one pipe and then it splits at one point. It does split. Thankfully, we don't digest with our lungs.
Underneath your epiglottis.
Yeah. But for quite a while, they're the same pipe.
And all connected through to your nose and your eyes and your ears.
Yeah. Don't eat with your eyes.
No.
Probably.
That's no.
That'd be bad. But yeah, and the story that I was usually told in intro linguistics was that like evolutionarily there was a cost-benefit analysis of like, do you want to not be able to choke on food? Or do you want a slightly longer speech apparatus so that you can make more distinctive sounds? And humans were like, yeah, choking on food. Let's do it. And like, apparently we don't choke on food enough times that it's a problem.
It was a good trade-off.
Yeah, well, there's actually quite a few protection mechanisms in your throat to stop you from choking. So, so do you know what the epiglottis is?
I know, but let's pretend we don't know because Ben's not here.
Okay, I don't know.
So the epiglottis is a little kind of flap, I guess, that sits at the back of your throat. And when you swallow, your epiglottis covers your air tube so that food can't go down it. So that is your first primary form of protection. Your second form of protection is actually your vocal cords. When you swallow, you've got two sets of vocal cords, your false and your true vocal cords. And when you swallow, these slam shut to prevent food from going down. So if food misses the epiglottis and goes down underneath, you've got two sets of vocal cords there to stop it from going into your lungs. And what a cough is it's this forced expulsion of air through your vocal cords to get all of that stuff back out again so that it doesn't go into your lungs and cause aspiration pneumonia.
So it's like trying to kick it up to the level above the epiglottis.
Yep.
And then if it doesn't go all the way up to the mouth, whatever, as long as it gets at least that high.
Yeah, because then you can keep coughing. You can, maybe you'll be able to swallow it back down. It's just that level of protection.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've gotten a little off topic from the question.
No, this is actually interesting.
No. This is the
because
question.
This is an area that I don't usually go to.
Yeah.
So after I aspirate some food, then I drink some water in hopes that the water will sort of go near that area and get whatever it was, get those corn chips out of there.
So don't do that.
My husband did that yesterday. We were eating and he was like coughing and he was like, oh, I need to drink water. So
yep. It was my first response too. But here's the thing, that cough is a good thing. That cough is getting any debris out of your throat and out of your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
What you should do is make sure that you're completely upright so that gravity is not working against you.
Mm-hmm.
And you should cough and cough and cough, and you should not eat or drink anything until it's been completely cleared.
Okay.
Why shouldn't I be upside down though?
Okay, I have no idea about upside down.
I think it works the same way because of peristalsis.
Peristalsis forces food down.
It does, that's why I think it's the same. It works the same way if you're upside down or right side up.
We're trying to get food up through the tract, right? And then once it's somewhere good, get it hopefully down the right food pipe, right?
Get it down again.
Okay. So, holding someone by the feet and shaking them.
Please don't do that.
We should say this is not medical advice. I am not a medical practitioner.
Nothing in this show is medical advice. Nothing.
No. The best thing to do, if someone is full on choking, if they start to go quiet, if they aren't able to cough, that's when you do your CPR, or not your CPR, your first aid and, back blows and chest thrusts and
back blows, which are the preferred method over what used to be called the Heimlich maneuver. We don't do that anymore, do we?
No, because it's a very specific move that doesn't work a lot of the time because it's very hard to get right. So back blows and chest thrusts are better, but that's to try and basically dislodge whatever's stuck in the throat. But yeah.
So it sounds like the overlap between linguistics and your work as a speechie has a lot to do with like the vocal tract, the mechanics of the human vocal tract, and that would get us to a lot of phonology. Would that be right, or is there more to it?
Well, phonology is definitely part of it. Where I'm at the moment, I'm working a lot in the disability field. So it's a lot of people with different disabilities who need support with something, and that includes swallowing and it includes communication. But for things like speech sounds, phonology is actually a big part of that. There are these things we call phonological processes, and that's the typical pattern of errors that children make when they're learning how to speak. So things like saying a W sound instead of an R sound, that's a typical phonological process.
And they'll be different in different languages, right? Because there are different target sounds. So you work in Australia, and I think that most of the people you encounter are attempting or are speaking English.
Yep.
So there are, like, for example, like this thing you just said about R's, like in Swedish, the most common thing is that people can't roll their R's.
Right.
That was my next question.
Which English speakers don't even have to care about at all.
Yeah. And what is considered to be, you know, a delay or a disorder for speech sounds does change based on what language you're speaking. Yeah. So in Australian English especially, we don't expect kids to roll their R's. If they can, that's fine. If they can't, that's also fine. Because it's not a sound that's required in our language.
Yeah.
But for a language like Spanish, where it is required to roll your R's, and there's actually a difference between different types of R's and it changes the word, then, yeah, not being able to roll your R's can be seen as a language delay or language disorder and might be addressed by a speechie.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of our pal Dan Dediu, who gave us an interview in the Talk the Talk days. He's native Romanian. He had a hard time doing it. So in that case, okay, before I go on to my real question, I have a secondary question. It's come up on Twitter. People have been asking, how do I roll my R's? How do I do what's known as an alveolar trill, which I'm good at, but not everyone is.
I'm not good at.
If you wanted to tell somebody how to do that, could you describe that, even though it's not an English sound, at least, except in Scottish English, it's not a usual English sound?
For rolling your R's, I couldn't describe it. Okay. Or actually...
Now I don't feel bad.
Yeah, well, so the one thing people keep saying is vibrate your tongue, but that's not a thing that you can really consciously do, right?
Yep.
What you can do is tap the top of your mouth with your tongue. Just a really quick tap, like in the sound better, right? Like that sort of T sound.
Better.
Yeah,
better.
That's good.
Yep.
Better.
So if you do that, that becomes a... that can become a rolled, not a rolled R, but a folded R.
Yeah.
So in a word like correr.
Like a bit retroflex.
Yeah. So that's that little flap. That's that tap of the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you try to do that, tap it, but hold it, that becomes more of a rolled R.
Okay. I'm going to try that.
Right? I'm very bad at this. But you're tapping the top of your hard palate with your tongue.
The top of your hard palate? Really?
Your soft palate's way back there.
No, but isn't that too far back?
It's like between the alveolar, like the post-alveolar.
Your hard palate is directly behind your teeth.
I'm using my alveolar ridge. Oh,
which is part of your hard palate, yes.
You're describing that as part of your hard palate. That's cool.
That is part of your hard palate, yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Sorry, I was thinking farther back. Never mind. Okay, thank you. That's an explanation that I can work on.
My niece and nephew were trying to teach my husband to roll his R's when we were in Sweden. He was learning Swedish. And they were like, oh, he's clearly has a problem with this particular sound. And they were saying words and he was like not producing them the way they liked them. And they would just be like, just look at my tongue now. And they would just point at their mouths and like make the sound. And he was like, I can't, I'm not Superman. Like I can't see inside your mouth.
Nope.
But that was a revelation to them. So they were like, oh, when I make that sound, that's not like visible to other people. And no, honey,
theory
it's
of
not.
mind.
And if you look at speech sound development, it's the sounds we can see are the ones we get first. So things like that, b, and some things like t and d, because you can see the tongue moving. Those are the ones that you get first. Sounds at the back, like k, g, those ones develop later, especially which is basically you just vibrating your throat.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of times when I've given talks and lectures and people come to me and they say, I'm concerned about my little nephew. Or a teacher said that he should get help from a speechie because he says this thing. And I always make it clear that I'm not a speechie and that they should see someone who's qualified. But I also know that a lot of things that people consider errors really do resolve with age. But could you give me a good guideline? What should I be telling these people from your perspective? When is intervention appropriate?
So with any sort of intervention, the first thing you want to look at is the milestones. So there are different, there are speech sound milestones, there are like language milestones, how many words, what type of words, how many sounds, what type of sounds, all of those that go across the lifespan. So if you've got, a 3-year-old who can't say an R sound, who's saying wabbit, that's considered fine, right? Because it's within that developmental milestone. When you start to get some delays, then you might start to look at intervention. So if you say you're at 18 months and your kid's not babbling, that's a thing that you go, oh, okay, this is well past the milestone. This is the time we need to get intervention, or at least to get an assessment.
I've heard that if you're not saying your first word by maybe 2 years, that's pretty late.
That's very late, yes.
And if you're not saying your first sentence by 3 years, that's pretty late as well.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes. So most children will say their first word within 12 months. So if you're getting to 18 months and 2 years and there's no verbal language, then that's when you'd want to say, oh, okay, I need to get this assessed.
Right.
What's the first thing you do? Would you straight to the speechy, or would you do something else first, like a hearing test?
I would first see your GP and get a hearing test.
Good.
Hearing loss or hearing difficulty is actually the number one cause of language delay.
Yep.
Yeah,
because if you can't hear words, you can't learn them.
Yeah.
And so even if if they've got tested at birth and there was no problems, I would still get them tested again because, things like ear infections, swelling in the ear, anything like that, constant sinus infections, that can cause hearing loss or hearing impairment, and that will affect your language.
Right.
Are these milestones known and we can look them up?
Yes. Actually, there's a website called raisingchildren.net.au. That one has all of the key language milestones from birth to 8 years old. It includes some literacy milestones as well. And you can go in, okay, expressively, what should they be able to say? Receptively, what should they be able to understand?
But I've heard that some of these milestones can be controversial as well. So and a lot of commercial interest is invested in making parents very anxious or exploiting parental natural anxiety.
We're just looking out for big speechy here.
So sometimes when I would definitely be like, I'm not a speech pathologist, but I would also be like, if they're under 3, I don't know exact milestones, but I'm like, it'll probably resolve itself. Because like you say, most kids produce their first word before they're 1 year old. But some kids produce them later and then develop fine, right?
Variability is the rule.
Yes, but it's not a bad thing to get them looked at.
Right.
Agreed.
But maybe not go to the company that says if you buy this thingamajig and play them this tune every day, then
No, don't do that.
Yeah, that is a good question, actually. Are there any sort of really bad things out there that people should avoid? What's some junk science that you've seen that people should just stay the heck away from?
Okay, so firstly, there's junk diets. If you feed this kid this magical diet, all of their mental problems will go away and all of their language will get better because, they're not so busy being hurt by their food. That's junk. Stay away from that.
Unless they're actually gluten intolerant.
I can see why people would be concerned about that because diet is super important, but that can be weaponized.
Yes. And randomly putting kids on diets that they don't need to go on isn't necessarily going to help.
Yeah. Okay, what else?
So there's something called facilitated communication.
Oh, God. Oh, that's total case. Yes. Thank you.
So this is when you'll have someone called a facilitator who is taking the kid's hand and moving it along a keyboard. And they're saying, oh, no, it's the kid who's moving their hand. I'm not doing it. But
wait,
really they're doing it.
They're doing it. This is like a Ouija board for kids.
Yes, I love you. Thank you. That's so good.
When you said the words facilitated communication, I thought you were going to talk assisting gestures.
Assisting gestures?
Like milk. Like
baby sign?
Like baby sign or just teaching your kid a sign language. But you're actually, there's like a person, there's a third person between you and your child. Like you're the parent, you have a child, a third person comes in.
Yes, and they hold the child's or the person's hand. People think that it works for adults too, and they say, oh no, the person's typing, but it's actually totally them typing. And this is easy to prove. You show both of them a picture, and then you say, what is the picture? And they'll get it right every time. But if you show the person and not the facilitator the picture, they can't do it because it's totally the facilitator who's doing it.
Why is this legal? Like, what's happening? Like, who's doing this? Like, this is crazy.
It's been denounced by SPA, which is the Speech Pathology Australia. That's our governing body in Australia. It's also been denounced by ASHA, which is the American Speech and Hearing Association. But there are charlatans who keep putting it out there, and they'll give it a rebrand and they'll give it a new name and they'll say, oh, this is actually something else. This is assisted typing. But no, that's facilitated communication again. Yeah.
It's such a compelling illusion. Ouija boards are compelling illusions.
Yeah, it is. It is very much like a Ouija board because the facilitator is moving their hand, but they might not even realize it.
Okay, so we've got two different kinds of junk science. Was there any other kind of junk science that you wanted to warn people away from, or should we?
The things to look out for is, does this have like a bunch of testimonials and that's the only thing supporting it?
Yep.
And does this have a lot of those buzzwords like, extreme improvement and, all those big promises. So anything that's promising a lot for a little bit of effort, you want to kind of, that's a red flag right there.
Yeah, too good to be true.
Is the truth that small improvements actually take a lot of effort? That like getting a child to not say wabbit is like really hard?
Well, I worked with a kid for 10 weeks to say a sh sound. Mm-hmm. We were doing all of the right lip movements and all of the right teeth positions, everything, but it was just really hard for this kid to do a sh. Mm-hmm. And that's not even to start on the ch and the j that we also needed to work on.
I was going to say, I'm a second language speaker of English. Those things are not like sheep, the bear, and that's a cheap dress.
Sheep and
Fuck
chip.
Me.
Yep.
Like, no.
Ship and chip.
Yeah.
Let's talk about autism for a second.
Yay.
What's the connection here between speech and language disorders and autism?
It's kind of a defining feature, really. So one of the things that we do, so that there's a new thing in speech and language pathology, and you'll also see it in other disciplines like in psychology and in occupational therapy, but we're trying to be neurodiverse affirming. So I'm going to be using some neurodiverse affirming language in this section. When I talk about communication being a defining feature of autism, if you look at the medical clinical model, you will see that there are two kind of, they call it the dyad of impairment, but I really don't like that term. But there are two main things that they're looking for to diagnose ASD. One of them is restricted interest in repetitive behaviors, and the other is social and communicational difficulties. And the reason that social and communicational are grouped together like that is because socializing is a huge part of communicating. So, so that's the background for it. So if we're looking for, we call it neurodivergent traits or neuroatypical traits, one of the ones you will see are differences in communications or differences in the way we communicate, which includes differences in eye contact, differences in tone of voice, differences in the words that we use. All of that is one of the neuroatypical traits that you will see in autistic children and adults.
Unless they're spending a lot of effort masking, which...
Yes, and that's actually part of it as well, because it shouldn't be hard to change your tone of voice based on what you're saying, and it shouldn't be hard to figure out what language to use. You see, I'm having a bit of trouble with my language right now. But this sort of thing doesn't come naturally. It does end up getting explicitly taught.
You shared with me a thing, an article on Medium by Rachel Cullen about the autistic pragmatic language hypothesis, which I read through it, and it sounds like it's saying the difference between someone who's autistic and someone who's allistic, the way they handle language, seems a bit like a cultural difference. I mean, there's brain stuff, but it's also just a difference in culture. Am I getting that wrong? Or
well, it's kind of cultural in the sense that there is an autistic culture.
Yep.
But it's also kind of, it can be quite alienating because the people around you are all expecting you to be a certain way and speak in a certain way and communicate in a certain way. And we just don't do that.
And you say we as an autistic...
As an autistic person, yes.
As an autistic person, yep.
Do you find there are certain countries and cultures that are known for being more, in lack of a better word, blunt? I lived in the Netherlands for a while, and I follow this like Dutch comedian on TikTok, and they make a lot of jokes about like how Dutch people are blunt and are like, oh, I got a gift.
Blunties.
Oh, this is an okay gift. Thank you. And
this is most satisfactory.
This is okay. Whereas, like, for example, Americans are known for being like, oh, amazing. This is the best thing I've ever seen. Oh my God. But it's a lie. And, for a lot of like Northern Europeans, it's hard to interact with Americans because we're like, why are they lying all the time? It's very stressful. Like, I have to guess. And it's almost sometimes when I, as a dramatic, like Northern European person, interact with Americans, I'm not saying I don't think I am on an autism spectrum at all, but it sounds a little bit similar to like some of the things I've heard. Do you think that means that it's easier to be autistic in the Netherlands? Forgive me if that's a stupid question.
That's an interesting question because things like eye contact, that's a very Western concept. So, when I went to Japan last year, I wasn't expected to make eye contact with anybody, and that was great.
Right.
And yeah. So I think in different places, different autistic traits would be more accepted or less accepted. But it's the overall picture that kind of determines whether this is a disability or not.
This is almost similar to what we were talking about with the speech sounds in a way, right? That like English has couplers, like your target, like the measure of like disability is like how easy it is for you to achieve a certain target. But if that target varies culturally and by language, then yeah.
Like deafness is only a disability in the context of a culture that doesn't get deafness.
Yeah. So it is very culture dependent. And things like there are some things that would be similarly difficult across the board. So if you find verbal language very difficult to use, then it's going to be difficult to communicate with people who are expecting verbal language, no matter what language that is.
Right.
if your primary form of communicating is something we call echolalia, which is repeating phrases or words that you've heard, it could be either straight after you've heard them, or it could be kind of later on, like taking all those phrases and using them to communicate instead of creating your own individual phrases. That's going to be a noticeable difference across the board, whether you're speaking English or German or Japanese or whatever. It's going to be something that basically shows the world that you are a different person.
Yeah.
But having said that, one of my areas of interest and one of the things that I do a lot of in my work is with something called AAC, or augmentative and alternative communication. So, nice big words, right?
Well, I was getting a little worried because it sounded a bit like facilitated communication, but I'm listening.
Goodness, no. And I've actually had to be very firm with some people about how to actually do that. But no, this is using things that are not verbal language to communicate. So it can be using some signs. This is not the same as a signed language, just making that clear. Mm-hmm. It's more like using specific signs because at this time, it's easier to move my hands than my mouth.
Mm-hmm. It's a gestural system.
Yes, it is a gestural system. And different countries will base it on their signed languages, but it doesn't follow the grammar of signed languages, and it doesn't have as many words.
Got it.
It's also things like picture communication, so pointing at pictures in a book or handing over cards.
I've seen that.
Or something, which is one of the things that I've had a lot of training in, is high-tech communication. So it'll be an iPad or a dedicated communication device where you press buttons and then it speaks.
Okay.
I had one question which Daniel hadn't written, which is not related to what you were just talking about, but which I wanted to ask you about.
Yes, please. Go for it.
Which was, like we were talking about before, there are certain milestones and you could go get assessed. Probably don't let your anxiety run wild and buy a bunch of shit.
No, don't do that.
But there are some, for example, a friend of the show, Megan Figueroa, is often reminding people on Twitter that some of the research done on so-called word gaps are not real. And there are ways of assessing people that, like, for example, I was reading a study about Samoan kids. So, like, in different cultures, you have different ways of bringing up kids.
Yep.
And taking a child away from their parents and putting them in a room in front of a white researcher and asking them, like, what words they know is, like, not a thing everyone's going to be, like, equally good at socially. So there's a research to show that, like, those experiments don't show what people actually know. And also that, like, how many words you know might not always be a great measurement of how good you are at communicating necessarily, right? So I was wondering if you could talk about, like, because that's all I sort of know. I follow Megan and I see what she writes and I know some things. But what do speech pathologists think and talk about these things?
So that's very accurate that it's definitely not, you're not going to sit someone down in a room and expect to get everything out of them. The thing with language and communication is it's very context dependent. So if I am doing an assessment, I'm not just going to go in with my test and my norms and say, here is the thing, where do you fall in amongst these norms? I'm also going to be speaking to the people around them. Like, how do they communicate with their parents? How do they communicate with their teachers? How do they communicate with other kids in the playground? Because you need that full picture. I might do an observation at home or at school just to see what are they doing. It's never going to just be one test, because one test is not going to give you the right answer. And even when we do things like kindy screens, which is you take a whole group of children from one cohort and you give them all the same test on the same day or the same couple of days. And it's basically just to get an average of how is these kids in this cohort, where do they fall? That is going to give you how a child did on that particular day, and that's it. It's not going to tell you their overall communication ability. It's not going to tell you what they're capable of. It might say, oh, here is an indicator that we might need to look into some intervention. But even then, you kind of got to take it with everything else that they have, especially if they're bilingual. Like that's a whole nother kettle of fish is bilingual children will perform poorly on English normed tests because, you know, they're based on English primary speaking populations.
Right.
And then people say, oh no, bilingualism, it's bad for kids. It'll lead to delays.
So here's the thing about bilingualism. You know, a lot of research has been done and there's still a lot we don't know about it. But if you look at just the number of words that kids are speaking, you can't just look at how many words they know in English and how many words they know in Mandarin. You actually have to see, okay, what's that total? Because what they find is actually, yeah, they are speaking less words in English and less words in Mandarin than same age peers. But if you add that number together, it becomes quite similar.
Right.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter because the only language that matters is English. So, you know, yeah.
And then
I can see why people would have that.
Maybe there's also two different sort of points because, people can have problems that we classify as a disability. And like we talked about before, that can be culturally dependent, be that like autism spectrum things or speech or something else. And speech pathologists come in and try and help people to reach a certain basic level so that they can get on with their lives, right? And then there are parents and stuff who worry about like them getting like straight A's in school and getting into Ivy League schools. And that's like a different, like that's not something, for example, that I think speech pathologists work on, right?
No, we'll do some stuff on literacy. We don't diagnose things like dyslexia. That's actually psychologists who do that. But we do support reading and writing with kids and with adults. But we're not here to, you know, teach you how to write a good essay or something like that.
Right, exactly. So like some of the things that I saw about the word gap things is like people are correlating it with like your mean income later in life. And like that the more words you know, it's basically just mean like the more middle class you are, surprise, the higher income you get. Like,
How about that?
Like, who knew?
Yeah. And if you look at a lot of those studies when they're talking about, you know, word gaps and language gaps and things like that, is it actually does come down to income. So the kids who end up with, you know, the higher paying jobs are the kids with the richer parents. And so it was things like owning books is correlated with higher income and higher test scores. And it's not about the books at all. It's about having enough income to own books, like to have a room dedicated to it or something like that. So yeah, it's all about income inequality.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's fair.
So what do people need to know? What's a misconception that you'd really like to correct about speechies and speech and language therapy? Speech and language pathology. Sorry. I will get it.
Oh, it's fine. See, people still say speech therapist.
Speechy business.
I have 3 ID cards from my new job because it kept getting printed wrong. And one of them says speech pathologist and one of them says speech therapist. And it's all confusing.
Oof.
We are not here to fix anyone. Like, I'm not going to come to someone and say, you are broken and I need to fix you. That's not my thing. That's not what we do. What I care about is, can you communicate with the people around you? Like, can you get across what you need, what you want, what you're thinking, you know, not just asking for things, but being able to say, isn't it a lovely day today? Or to communicate that sort of thing. And are you safe? So this is a bit of this is the swallowing, you know, are you able to have the right nutrition and are you able to eat without getting a lot of chest infections? Are you safe? Can you communicate that you are unsafe? Can you tell someone around you, oh, actually, I'm being hurt by this person, or this thing is making me feel sick? You know, can you communicate, I have an allergy to bees? Are you safe? So, yeah, I don't want to fix anybody. I just want them to be themselves and to be, you know, effective communicators.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your area. I know that this is an area that we don't touch very much because it's something that I'm not really, I haven't really gone into it. So I'm really grateful that you have come and given some ideas and corrected some misconceptions. Thanks for that.
Anytime.
Are you ready to play? Because
Yes.
I think it's time to play Related or Not, the game where PharaohKatt is going to give us a couple of words or the same word with two different senses, and we are going to try to guess whether they are related etymologically or is the connection between them merely coincidental. PharaohKatt, what have you got?
So I had two words and then I completely forgot what I was thinking about with those two words.
Good start.
But then I remembered again.
Okay. Good.
Okay, so sense as in like what is that sense? Your smell, your eyes, your senses.
Okay, like Sixth Sense.
Yep. And sensible. Like I am a sensible person.
Okay.
That doesn't mean and to be a sensible person, we don't know if that's related to like does it make sense? She has
that's
a lot
even
of
another
sense.
Okay, well, that's another thing entirely, so we might have to tackle that one.
But do we think that she has a lot of sense and she's sensible?
I mean, when you put it that way, it sounds like they're just totally the same word, a normal outgrowth. I'm aware, though, that in English, this is a little bit different. For example, in English, we say that someone is sensible. But in French, if you say that someone is sensible, which sounds like it'd be the same word, it doesn't mean that they're sensible. It means that they're sensitive. But that still retains a bit of the sensey sense of sense.
I think they're related.
Okay. Well, in that case, I think they're not related. I think there's enough play there that I think maybe they snuck in under the same word because they're kind of the same thing. And that happens all the time with words that start out different. They grow together.
Okay. And the answer is they are related.
Yeah. Good job. Good job.
So there's a nice Proto-Indo-European root of like sent to go, as in I have been sent somewhere, which is really cool. And that kind of morphed into like to have in mind or to perceive.
What? This is bonkers.
And then that got applied to the external or outward senses.
Oh my goodness.
So you've got your inner sense or your common sense or your consciousness. So that kind of then went into capable of sensation or feeling, sensible.
Yep.
So there we go. So we actually kind of, there's some words in German and some words in French, and it all has a common Proto-Indo-European root.
That's really
How
fun.
about that? Yep. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
In Swedish, I think the same cognate also means mind.
Yep, that would make a lot of sense because...
It would make a lot of what?
Right. Yeah. God, do you know about that thing that's supposed to be a thing that women do in email a lot and I do it a lot? Does it make sense?
Does that make sense? I'm famous for saying that. Does that
I
make
do
sense?
that a lot. It's just like, I'm like, I don't want to have an aggressive time.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but it's also a really useful skill. You're building connection. You're doing a comprehension check. That's a really good thing to be able to do. Does that make sense? I don't know why people have focused on that as an irkage thing, except that it's noticeable and people seem to get mad about anything that they notice. So
maybe.
It just makes sense. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And
that was good.
We are seeking out sponsors. If your product doesn't suck and we don't hate you, then get in touch and you can sponsor a game of Related or Not, or Yeah, No, or No, Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, PharaohKatt.
We decided on that.
Let's get to some news. This one is a big study about stuttering, which is something that I'm sure, PharaohKatt, our Speechie, you know a lot about. This is a paper by Jessica O'Boyce and a team. Dr. Boyce is from the Murdoch Children's Research Institute in Melbourne, and the article was published in Developmental Medicine and Child Neurology.
Yep.
Tell us about this study. I see that it was pretty big, nearly 1,000 participants across the age span. So this This sounds like it'd be a blockbuster.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest studies of its kind, which is pretty cool. So this is a study on stuttering and genetics, because there is an idea that stuttering has a genetic component, which was kind of proven by this study.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's not 100%. I don't think anything is ever 100%, but basically what we're finding is that if you have specific genetic traits and add to that specific environmental traits, your chances of being a stutterer increase.
Huh.
I see here that about half of the folks that they studied had a family history of stuttering. That's huge.
Yeah, that is one of the big things. And that's actually a lower number than I expected.
Oh, really?
Oh,
What were
really?
you thinking?
And it does make me wonder about, because this was all self-reported stuttering. It does make me wonder about people who either had a stutter and recovered and their kids didn't know about it, or there was some other distant relation.
Because people just don't want to talk about it.
Yep.
And the reason you were surprised and thought it would be a higher number is because you've met people who stutter and you've noticed patterns.
I've noticed patterns. So you'll see someone say, oh, my kid has just started stuttering. Will he grow out of it? Oh, come to think of it, my husband kind of speaks like that sometimes. I wonder if he just learned it from him. And the husband's not identifying as a stutterer, but you know that that's what's going on.
Seems like a little less shame is needed for this kind of thing to get help.
And I think, and that's the other thing, is I think that awareness is growing. So kids are being identified as stuttering more often than they were in the past. There was some other really interesting things that they found. For example, there's no gender correlation at all. So gender does not affect your risk of stuttering.
Okay.
Anxiety, though.
Oh.
Yeah.
Everyone's massively surprised. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The problem with this is that it's kind of like a chicken and egg sort of problem, because having a stutter and not being able to get your words out, or having that sort of fear of judgment, can increase anxiety. And also, if you are already a stutterer, that gets worse during periods of high emotion, including anxiety, which then makes it worse, which then increases anxiety. So it kind of is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
So what we've found is people who stutter are much more likely to report having anxiety. So it's the numbers just grow and grow and grow. If you look at people with persistent stuttering, not anxious is 9.6%, a little anxious 24.9%, fairly anxious 27.2%, very anxious 26.8%, and then it goes down again for extremely anxious. But you can see it climbing.
Right.
I see also that they looked at stuttering severity over ages, and I noticed that the older people reported a severity of like 1s and 2s, not very much, but the young people were much more spread out across the levels. Is that because older people have sort of worked on it and gotten it under control?
Well, people can kind of learn tricks to self-manage their own stuttering. You aren't noticing it, but I'm actually using some of these tricks myself.
Okay.
So things like slowing down. There's a hand gesture that I teach sometimes that helps, because it helps you move with the flow of the words. But a lot of these tricks you learn to use, and sometimes you don't even need to be taught them. You just go, oh, this is what made my stuttering better, so I'm going to do this a lot.
Okay.
So yeah, basically the older you are, the more likely it is that you've learnt some of these tricks and you've got your own little adaptations working.
And learning things just take time, so it's not surprised that it's correlated with age.
Yep. One thing I found interesting in this study is it was all 7 and up.
Okay.
So the most likely onset of stuttering is between around 2 or 4, like 2 to 4, which is when you get this nice language explosion. So when we hear 3 and 4-year-olds have suddenly started stuttering, we go, yes, that is the time that I expect stuttering to happen, because your brain is working on so many things that it starts to almost misfire a little bit. If you have therapy for stuttering at that age when it first onsets, you can stop stuttering.
Oh.
So basically you retrain your brain and those stuttered pathways don't get hardwired.
Oh, okay. So
Gosh.
this is like the general thing we know about the brain, that like things you do a lot are easier to do. And that goes for good things and bad things. So you can develop bad and good habits and bad and good ways of doing things. So the idea is if you catch it early while the brain is still plastic and like malleable, you can be like, yeah, you explored that pathway, but how about you go this way instead?
Yeah, you
Right.
basically just re-encourage the brain to speak without the stutter.
Wow, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's not as true in Australia where we do have stuttering clinics for younger kids and stuttering programs for younger kids, but a lot of adults in like the UK and the US, you know, won't end up getting any sort of treatment until 7+, and you're much less likely to recover if that's when you start to get intervention.
Well, I noticed that from the study that it said 75.9% of participants had sought stuttering therapy, but only 15.5% identified as having recovered. Does that mean that this is just super intractable if you let it go?
Not necessarily. The problem that you get is that there are some kids who'll have a stutter for a year or two and then just spontaneously recover.
Yeah.
There's just no way to identify that. So in that moment, you don't know, is this person going to spontaneously recover or do they need some sort of stuttering therapy? But with adults, the treatments you use are different because you're not trying to change that pattern before it's wired. You're trying to support speech more. It's fluency facilitation. So it's basically developing strategies that make it easier to speak fluently rather than trying to fix the stutter. So, you know, once you hit like 10 and up, I mean, yeah, at that point, you're probably not going to be trying to fix. You're more likely to facilitate. This one is very interesting, and I get access to the full script because I am an alumni member of my university. Library access.
Yay.
But there's another study that the Curtin Institute is doing, which is specifically looking for genetic markers. So when that one comes out, I will give you guys a heads up if I can.
Yes, please. That sounds really fraught because no parent, I mean, genetics is genetics, but sometimes when something is genetic, parents feel like they've somehow done something to delay their children or to hurt their child, which isn't true.
No, it's not. And that's one of the things that, you know, whenever we are talking to parents, we need to keep that in mind because no one's at fault here, right?
Yeah.
Like the kid's not at fault, the parent's not at fault. It's just this is how this random confluence of factors has emerged in this person, you know? So yes, there's some genetic likelihood, but then there's also environmental factors. There's also personal factors like kids who are more resilient are less likely to develop a stutter. So there's so many things happening. You can't just say, oh, it's genetics. I did this, my fault.
Mm-hmm. It's just brains, man.
And also, I know I have some friends who stutter and like they have some strategies and stuff. And you can, as a person who's not stuttering, you can learn strategies of like trying to be helpful to them. And it's not the end of the world. And it's like, it's not the end of the world.
No, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
If it is causing you distress, then you get help.
Yeah.
If it is not causing you distress, live your life.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to our next story. This one is from an article in the West Australian by Jim Hungerford. He's the CEO of the Shepherd Centre. It's about Indigenous hearing loss among Aboriginal people. This had a fairly mind-blowing statistic for me.
Yeah. So 43% of Australian Indigenous children have some form of hearing loss or impairment. So,
wow.
Yeah, this is things like repeated ear infections or burst eardrums, things like that. And that's a shocking statistic. And that is something that Australia and also us as species, we have a role as well to address this. And the thing that gets even more upsetting for me is that it's not 43% across the board. It's something like 49% in rural and remote communities. So the chances increase when you're living in a rural or remote area.
Mm.
Wow.
Where you're also less likely to get assessed for stuff like that.
So what's going on?
So yeah, why is this happening? Do we know?
Is it
So
is it genetic or?
there's not really any evidence to say it's genetic.
Okay.
There have been some theories about it, about genetics and speech sounds and stuff, but that is not my area of expertise, so I'm not even going to try there.
No.
So please keep in mind that I am not an Indigenous person and nobody here right now is an Indigenous person, so we are coming at this from a position of privilege, and I think that needs to be acknowledged.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
So there are some factors. For example, there is a gap in health services between white Australians and Aboriginal Australians. There is a lack of health services available to Indigenous Australians. And some of it is direct, which is things like longer waiting lists or less likely to be taken seriously about concerns. Someone I know actually had that directly happen to them, where their child was getting repeated chest infections and illnesses, but the health department was not taking it seriously. Or not the health department, the health system was not taking it seriously. And it wasn't until they got the white grandmother to come in and speak on behalf of them that they actually got access to health services.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there is this lack of access. Add to that a mistrust. And this is an earned mistrust. This is because the health system has treated Aboriginal people so shockingly and appallingly that you get people who don't want to go to the doctors because they know this is the sort of thing they're going to be facing.
Right.
And then on top of that, rural and remote communities are less likely to have health services on site. So you need to travel further to get health services. Telehealth is something that's only recently come about, and that's about to lose Medicare access as well. So there's all of these factors that are contributing to it.
One solution that Jim Hungerford says is the introduction of an Indigenous voice to Parliament. I'm quoting here, "A body enshrined in the Constitution that would enable Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to provide advice to the Parliament. Should the voice be created, communities have a greater chance of being heard, prompting further action from the government." That sounds like a pretty good start.
It sounds like, I don't know, like Kitty was saying, we're not Indigenous folk. It sounds a bit like it's a bit of a distance, like on the ground access to healthcare that you trust and you can rely on, and an Indigenous voice to Parliament in Canberra. There's a lot of steps in between, right? There's a lot of people in between. There's a lot of authorities in between. There's a lot of time in between. Probably this can take a while to push. I was wondering if there's a more of a campaign to get more representation of Indigenous folk in healthcare roles.
Yeah, I'm definitely a supporter of the voice, as well as treaty. That's something we need.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some kind of effort to increase the number of doctors and nurses and healthcare workers who are Indigenous, but there are a lot of barriers that need to be overcome for that to work. So there's things like monetary barriers. As part of my degree, I needed to work for 20 weeks without pay, 4 days a week.
That's outrageous.
Yeah, if I didn't have a partner who could support me, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah. No. Why? Like, I think I saw a clip from Cardi B who was saying, like, it's like, why are you making people pay to be higher educated to provide a vital role to society? Like,
yeah. So if you're already facing economic inequality, it's very, very hard to get to that level. And a number of my cohort dropped out or went to part-time because they simply couldn't afford it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Cardi B, does the B stand for based?
And there's also things like housing inequality. So you're more likely to get illnesses and infections if you're living in crowded living conditions, which is more likely to happen if you have income inequality.
Right.
So all of these factors just compound on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
This fills me with despair. What do we do?
That's a great question, and I would like to know.
We solve systemic inequality. Yay!
One of the things that SPA has, Speech Pathology Australia has just started doing is having cultural sensitivity and cultural safety training as part of your yearly registration. So we're required to get a certain number of like mentoring hours and training hours to keep registration. And some of that doesn't have to be, but can be specifically for cultural sensitivity. But it's things like, you know, getting the skills to work with communities and to support communities to not just like go in as the white person who's going to save them and I'll be the healthcare worker who's saving you, but actually have like a cultural liaison and work with them and train them to be their own, you know, healthcare workers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a slow process, and I just really hope that we can get it together.
Yeah, me too. Closing that gap has been rough. That's hard. Let's take the final news article that you gave us. This is about new LGBT signs in Korean Sign Language. There's an article in the Korea Times about a couple of activists, well, a bunch of activists, Woo Ji-yang and Kim Bo-shok, creating new signs because the old ones, frankly, were not great. What did you notice about this one, PharaohKatt?
I actually noticed that this has some similarities with the way that gay and lesbian used to be done in Australian Sign Language or in Auslan.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So the Auslan sign for gay, it used to be like this limp wrist gesture.
Oh, my God.
Which is, you know, of course, considered fairly offensive. And, you know, now it's just kind of, it's a hands, you can't see what I'm doing. I'm putting my I've got my hand up in front, and I'm touching my middle finger to my thumb 3 times.
Right.
So that's gay. And then if I make a little L shape with my hand and put it to my chin, that's lesbian.
Okay.
That's the new sign or that's the old sign?
That's the new sign.
Okay, because I noticed that the article was super vague about the Korean signs, but it sounded like they were not great. Like the gay one was like iconic for butt sex, and I'm sure that the lesbian one was like fucking this kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Jesus Christ. Okay, so
is there I was going to say, again, none of us here are like signers or deaf, but I know that in queer communities, spoken communities, sometimes people have tried to reclaim terms.
Yep.
Right? And like, I don't know, the limp wrist or like, it sounds like the ones where you're actually imitating sexual acts is a little bit, well, I guess it's
yeah. I mean, that does sound that does sound a little bit more extreme than the limp wrist gesture.
Yeah,
but it just kind of
people are like, oh yeah,
yeah. It just struck me at how you know, LGBTQ and queer communities have had to fight to get, you know, their words and their words for themselves to be, you know, representative of themselves.
Yes. So I noticed that the sign now in Korean Sign for Gay is a right fist with a thumb up moving forward from one's chest. And what that expresses is a man who is attracted to another man.
Yeah.
So that's
like
cool.
The same.
Yep.
Oh, it looks like great. Like, okay. Like
I like that too.
Up is
well, in Auslan, this is good, this is bad, and this is finished.
Right.
Doing
Okay.
lots of fun signs with their hands. Is it because the thumbs up fist gesture in Korean sign means a man?
I don't know.
That was the thing that I got from reading the article. That
right.
Gave me that impression, but I can't confirm it.
Okay.
I tried looking at, there's a good Korean sign dictionary, which I will put up on our webpage for this episode in the show notes. It's becauselanguage.com. I couldn't read it because the site was in Korean and I got hung up on the translation thing. So
yeah, it's not easy.
Sorry, my bad for not speaking Korean. But anyway.
Yeah, and I clearly don't know Korean Sign Language. But it just sort of goes to show that, you know, all around the world, the queer deaf community has had to fight to have their words, you know, used and understood and to not be demeaned by the words that they're spoken or that are signed.
Signed, yes. Well, that is super positive. And thank you so much for bringing these stories to us. We really appreciate the contributions that you make because you haven't just curated this episode. You've been constantly, as any listener to the show knows, you've been constantly handing us great stuff that you find. And we're really, really grateful to you for all that you contribute to the show.
Yeah.
Well, now as a member of SPA, I get access to like specific scientific journals and they send me an update every quarter. So I get all of this cool new research and stuff too.
Nice.
Neat. Well, we'll be on tenterhooks to figure out what's new, what's coming down the pike.
Yeah.
Let's go on to words of the week, and PharaohKatt has sent us some really great words. One of them, crikey core.
This one is so fun.
I love this one.
And this is not something that I'd even considered to be like a thing until it got pointed out on Twitter. So it was basically someone on Twitter who was saying, let's talk about other cultures the way that Western cultures speak about Asia. So they've posted a picture of fairy bread and said, ugh, this reminds me of Bluey season 2, episode 3 so bad. Imagine growing up Australian and having fairy bread and pass the parcel at birthday parties. It's so crikey core.
It's so crikey core. And all the Americans were like, what's pass the parcel?
Like all great Twitter things, this originally came from Tumblr because that's where all the Twitter things come from.
Okay.
But yeah, someone on Twitter took a screenshot and reposted it with things like, this is crikey core, and it's stuff like fairy bread and Vegemite and Steve Irwin. And it's basically all that Australian stuff that people we kind of feel is a little bit cringe.
Yeah, people say good day, but flying doctors. Oh my God, flying doctors.
Yeah, flying doctors.
We're always a bit cringe about our culture, though. It's like, but we got a lot of great stuff.
Feeling cringe is crikey core.
You know what I say? Don't kill the part of yourself that is cringe. Kill the part of yourself that cringes. For the breakdown of the word, we know that core is that thing that we append to every sort of movement, like
every aesthetic.
fairy core or every aesthetic.
That's the correct term.
Cottage core and...
Gen Z people, please love me. I know your terminology.
and then crikey being what Steve Irwin, the natural guy, said a lot.
Yep.
I really like crikey core because it used to be that there was this, I mean, Australians of the 1940s, 50s, 60s really struggled to get their own identity, and they did it usually through language. Whole bunch of Aussie slang, some cultural habits, some modes of dress. But this was an attempt by Australians to distinguish themselves. And then that kind of went by the by because we don't use a lot of those terms anymore. I can't think of the last time anybody said that somebody else was a cobber or something like that. But when we see crikey core, this is like Australians trying to pinpoint those things that are Australian. And I'm thrilled that when we got the list, it was Bluey and buttered bread with sprinkles on it. That's so perfect.
And lamingtons.
Could have been a lot worse.
Which nobody ever eats except as part of a school. You never just sit down and make some lamingtons, with the sponge cake dipped in chocolate with the coconut on it. You always make it for school things as a money raiser or something.
Well, you never just eat fairy bread either. It's always as part of a birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically a kid's birthday party, unless you're kind of doing that like Australian thing where we're going to have kids' food today. Is crikey core?
Can I ask, is crikey core what outsiders think is typically Australian, or what Australians think is typically Australian?
I think the list is open. I don't know.
I think it kind of started with what outsiders thought of, but we've kind of grabbed it and we're like, no. Milo is crikey core, thongs are crikey core, mullets are crikey core.
Mullets definitely. I was just, it's because there's like the whole like Steve Irwin throw a shrimp on the Barbie version of Australia, and then there's like what Australians like the cute things. I don't know. Living in Australia as a non-Australian, it also seems like Australians love to think of themselves as cute and nice and sort of like lower middle class or working class, in contrast to like British poms who are all about class and stuff like that. And those things are true. There's also like we were talking about, there's a lot of indigenous people in Australia and immigrants in Australia, and they don't tend to get to be part of the Australian culture nation building, right? Like none of spring rolls are not crikey core, I think. Whereas, yeah.
I mean, no matter how long I live here, I will never be considered Australian because Australianism for many people is tied to how you sound. What's up with that? Not that I'm hurt by it or not that it bothers me or anything. It bothers other people a lot more. I'm coming from a place of privilege. But, you know, it's not easy to pinpoint. And you mentioned spring rolls. It's like, what's Australian food? 20 years ago, I don't know if I could have told you because we just had this kind of fusion of lots of other things. But now I'm just thrilled that maybe some things are emerging and we're going to be keeping a list. Too bad it's Milo and Vegemite, but, you know.
Wheat bix, sausage sizzle, meat pies. Hey, Vegemite!
Hey, there you go. I'm in my pantry, so I'm surrounded by all these things. Salt that comes in a slightly conical container.
You should get the green one instead of the red one.
Because it has iodine?
Yes.
I agree with you. Why does this even exist still? I don't know.
Some people hate iodine. I don't know.
I'm just trying to avoid big iodine. That's all I'm saying. Let's go on to an event that I've been kind of ignoring.
Oh, wait, I have one thing more about core.
Oh.
Which is a question for people, because I have seen this around. And I want to get people's guesses. I'll post it on Discord as well, and then maybe next episode I'll see what it means. What do you think core means?
Okay, I have a guess.
Yeah?
Core. My guess is there must be an aesthetic that is about aesthetics. It must be a meta-aesthetic. People who like talking about aesthetics, and it's their way of life. That's a terrible guess. That is not what it is. PharaohKatt, you could do a better job.
Oh, can I? Core. Is
it about apples?
Is it about trying to find like the definitive version of something and like it's the core of something and that's your aesthetic?
Like the most prototypical.
It must be a different sense of core.
Yeah.
It seems where I've seen it to be like similar to normcore or like mainstream or basic. Not chuggy.
No.
But like it seems to be like I think it means mainstream. Like what most people. Yeah, but normcore is not mainstream. Normcore is but I am exploring it. We'll see. But I'll take guesses.
I am several generations too old for this. I'm going to tell you right now.
I think I'm too old for this.
Yeah.
Quick one. Spy balloon. We've had some events in the last month where spy balloons were floating over the USA because the Chinese were being the Chinese. Was that offensive? Because people in the Chinese government decided they wanted to be sky trolls.
Yes.
Did they get anything useful? Maybe
Probably.
not. Then we discovered that during the Trump administration, there were spy balloons floating all over the place. And nobody shot them down. Nobody noticed at all. Do I care about this? Not really.
Okay.
No.
But you did bring to us, PharaohKatt, an article by Ebony Nilsson in The Conversation. Dr. Nilsson is a research fellow from the Australian Catholic University. Yes, there is one.
This one, okay, it's because it's about cats that it caught my attention, and I do love my cats.
That's the part I noticed. Okay, cool.
But it's just kind of going into the history of different spycraft and how animals had been trained to, spy on humans, basically using listening devices.
Yep. Because they're everywhere. This is a brilliant idea because everywhere you look, there's a cat watching you somewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, there's that conspiracy that, birds aren't real. They're actually spying devices. So I thought that was funny.
Yep.
But there's things like trained ravens, because ravens and crows are very intelligent. So you can get them to go to certain places and just stick a listening device on their leg.
Mm-hmm.
And trained cats, which I had never heard of before until reading this article.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Dr. Nilsson says the CIA trained and surgically implanted cats with transmitters and microphones to send them to listen in on people's conversations. But I think they just spent most of their time up in trees waiting for people to rescue them. Also murdering lots and lots of wildlife.
Yes, keep your cats inside.
Yes, please.
But I just thought it was funny because it was called Operation Acoustic Kitty.
That is cute.
Which is a fantastic album name. We're dropping that one next week.
But don't surgically. This is like a bad idea.
You're right. Surgically. Ew. I read right through that and thought it was a collar thing, which would be so easy to do. But no.
Yeah. The only surgical thing in your cats, unless they need, some sort of specific care, but really just give them a microchip and you're fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Last one. This one's from me, and it's something that I do, something that I have done, and then I heard the term for it. Verbal blinkering. Verbal blinkering. Does anybody have a guess?
Is it when you change or when you are speaking in a certain way to make people think a certain way? So like you've got your blinkers on?
It is not that sense of blinker.
I
have to know that. Do you know the sense of blinker that I mean, Hedwig?
I have a guess. Is it like when you're in a car and you blinker to the left to show people that you're going left?
That is the sense of blinker that I mean.
Is it when
indicator?
Is it when you signpost in a conversation, when you're trying to like funnel people gently to be like, I'm about to change the topic. How do you feel about talking about apples? Yeah.
Okay, I think you're getting very close. So I'll tell you the story, and this has happened a bunch of times. I'm walking home from the gym, and it's getting dark, or it is kind of dark, or I'm getting to my car or something. And walking along a little further up the path is a lone person, a lone woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that I'm coming on the same path. I'm going to pass them pretty soon, but it could be very threatening for a lone man to suddenly sort of loom up behind you. So what I've started doing is just verbal blinkering. I'll say, hey, just coming up on the right side. I'm going to pass you here.
Oh, this is like bikers do. I am not loving it.
Okay. But I've heard it referred to as verbal blinkering. What would be a better thing to do to make my presence known and to say, I'm just going to be passing you on the right here? I guess I could just get away from the situation and go, way far away. But what's a good thing to do?
Just pretend you're talking on the phone. Just do what women do.
That's what I was going to say. Like, pick up your
Really?
phone
don't address them. Because if you say something like, hey, I'm coming up on your right, like Canberra bikers do this because they all think they're like in like Lycra Tour de France lifestyle. So you're biking along in a park and someone's like, hey, coming up on your left. And I'm like, ugh. Like that makes me more shocked than them coming up on my left. But I know.
Okay.
Yeah, they could just use your bell, but
yeah.
Okay, so I have done the phony phone call. It's like I pick up my phone and I say, "Hey, hon, I'm just coming back from the gym."
Yeah, I think so. Because I think Americans underestimate how much people from some other cultures get stressed by being addressed in a public space.
Yeah, okay. You don't mind that it's a little deceptive because I'm not really. I guess I could make a phone call.
I don't think it's deceptive at all.
Hey, babe, I just called you because I'm coming home and there's a person up and I want to signal to them. I'm mostly just calling you because I'm verbal blinkering. Okay, bye, babe.
No. Just literally
you don't need to do that.
So I picked up the dog at daycare and they said he has fleas. Like, whatever.
Okay, thank you. What do you think? Let's hear your comments, especially if you're on Discord. Jump on it, get to the episode stream where I've posted this episode. Tell me what you think. Is my original suggestion better? Is their suggestion better? What do you prefer? If you're not a woman, what do you prefer? What's your preferred vibe? If you're a man who wants to be less threatening, what do you do? We want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you can get in touch by lots of other ways, which we're going to tell you about. But I guess it's time to wrap this up. So, Crikey Core, Spy Balloon, Verbal Blinkering, our words of the week. We've got some comments. One from Jenna via email. Jenna says, I absolutely love the show. I admit that when you changed your name from Talk the Talk and started veering away from pure linguistics, I was a little bit skeptical, but as with many things in my life, getting out of my own head and listening to other people's opinions was ultimately in my best interest. I am glad to listen to you podcasting so educationally and so anti-conservatively. Do we do that? Is that what we do?
We do that. You in particular do that.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, I didn't realize I was so, raging. I don't mind, but...
No, I know you don't mind. That's why I'm telling you.
Okay, but you actually identify as a socialist, Hedvig. I'm a capitalist. Am I more hardcore than you? I don't think so. Wait, do you identify as a socialist?
I mean, I do, but I find that you tend to be a bit more polarized.
Awesome.
Kitty's a listener. Well, we can ask her.
Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, it feels like the opposite of conservative, honestly, because you're taking all of the language changes that conservatives are like, no, stop, don't. And you're like, actually, let's do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
We both do that.
So in that sense of conservative, yes. Like, I don't believe in
That was a
being
dodge.
Studgy. But in terms of like general politics, I feel like Daniel is more likely to squeeze things into like Democrat, Republican, American universe.
I want to talk about this for a second because you remember, Hedvig, how when I did your intro, it was like, what is Hedvig Kiergaard primarily known for?
Witcher.
I did the same thing with what is Daniel Midgley primarily known for.
Uh-huh.
I'll just read a little bit of this. Through his research and teaching, Midgley has made important contributions to our understanding of how language works, how it's learned, and how it's used in different contexts.
Okay,
he has also been a strong advocate for the importance of linguistic diversity and the preservation of endangered languages. And that's how you know, folks, that ChatGPT is making shit up, because I do not feel like a strong advocate at all. But I'm like, is this what the corpus has got for me? That's super interesting. Am I super hardcore?
No, I think it's just compared to a lot of other people, linguists in general talk more about language endangerment than anyone else. Most people don't even know that there are more than 100 languages in the world, right? That's the base level we're starting from. And that's okay. Not everyone needs to, there's a lot of things to know in the world. Not everyone can know everything. It's
true.
Reasonable. But anyway, what else does Jenna say?
Jenna has a comment about our last episode where we talked about the names for girl chooks and boy chooks and cows and widowers and things like that. Jenna says, I think I need to become a patron because I have many thoughts about your discussion of male and female names for animals. I think one key point that one of the patrons alluded to is that farming animals is a system which hijacks the reproductive system of those animals. In that context, it's very important to distinguish between those that are biologically female and those that are biologically male. You want to know if your animal is going to be able to give milk or eggs, or if its meat is going to start to taste funny after the hormones start coursing through its body. Editing a little bit. Taking this whole discussion one step further, I wonder if the gender binary that is such an integral part of historically agricultural Western society is influenced by this pattern of dividing animals into male and female based on their usefulness to the culture. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us, plebes. Okay. Jenna, P.S. What if you're lying in bed on your stomach? Do you guys get that one?
I've heard that that's bad. And it's the thing about left and right side of the bed.
Yes, it is.
I tried to call it the liver and non-liver side
stomach
of the bed.
Side. Yeah.
Which I still think
Whereas
is good.
We said bed left if you're lying in it and it's on your left side, but maybe if you're facing the other way, maybe it's bed right. I don't know.
But about the thing about the gender binary, did you want to talk about that or not?
Yes, please. Let's give a comment.
Just that a lot of mammals that are living in socially complex ways, like humans, or a lot of herd animals and stuff, are able to do things that don't have to do with solely reproductive roles. So, grandmothers or uncles or people who aren't even related to the child in question can help rearing it. And in a lot of those socially complex mammal structures, child raising takes a very long time, right? You don't just pop out your babies or the babies eat through your gut and are born. You actually have to spend time with them and teach them stuff. And they're pretty useless.
Especially humans, because of the way our brains develop. We have to be born before we're fully mature. So
otherwise, the human pelvis would look like a bowling ball return machine.
And you could almost, I've heard some philosophers of biology say, like, you can see, like, as a trade-off, because to genetically encode things is, like, very expensive evolutionarily, but to encode things culturally and have to start with a malleable plastic brain and then encode important information culturally is, like, a quicker path to get better at things than to, like, hardwire behavior. Because also, if you hardwire behavior, if your environment changes, you're screwed. So, and in that cultural, social child rearing, you don't need to be raised by the people who are your direct parents. And there's less need to be so rigid about family and gender structures, I think. Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Jenna, for that comment. Linda via email says, love your podcast. Your discussion of tricky language issues reminds me of this one. She gave her dog biscuits. How many meanings can you find?
She either gave her own dog or someone else's dog biscuits, or she gave a person dog biscuits, and that person is a her. Mm-hmm. So I've got 3.
So 3?
Yeah. I can think of 3.
Yeah, so she and her doesn't co-refer, or they could co-refer. Like, what's that one? Every girl thinks she is a genius, which could mean that every girl thinks she herself is a genius, or thinks that there's another she that is a genius. Mm-hmm. She gave her dog biscuits. Yep, 3.
I think 3.
But then again,
we're fine.
Wait a minute. Nope. Because dog biscuits could mean multiple things as well.
Okay, so she gave her own dog biscuits.
Yep.
She gave her someone else dog biscuits.
Well, that was Hedwig's first 2.
Yep. She gave someone else's dog biscuits, so that's our 3.
Yeah.
She gave her dog over there.
And then I was saying biscuits has multiple senses.
Yeah, like there's the dog biscuit sense, there's the English biscuit sense, and then there's the American biscuit sense.
Yeah, so we got 6 more. No, I mean, wait, we multiply, right? Oh, no, we got at least 5 going on, because dog biscuits is a unit.
I don't know why, but I don't think Linda, I think she only because otherwise we could say the multiple meanings of dog. Like, that man is a dog.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Because that is a thing that people do. Okay. I think, well, that is fun. Thank you, Linda, for that little brain teaser. Somewhere between 3 and 5 is my answer. Mm-hmm. A big thank you to PharaohKatt. Thanks for coming on the show and giving us all your stuff.
Yes.
No worries. I had a great time, and I would love to be on again at some point.
Well, alrighty, right. And thanks also to Dustin of Sandman Stories, who recommends us to everyone. Thanks to the team of Speech Docs, who transcribes our every word. And most of all, you, our patrons, who give us so much support and make it possible to keep the show going.
And we had a nice message from Speech Docs, didn't we?
We did? Let's see if I can find that.
I think Speech Docs sent the transcript from the latest episode and said that they are very happy to be the guardians of Ben's fragile ego.
Yes. And Ben's fragile ego was all in capital letters, as though it was an entity.
Yeah. So. Loving it.
If you like the show, here's what you can do. Number 1, you can send us ideas and feedback, like PharaohKatt often does. There are lots of ways to do that. You can follow us. We're Because Lang Pod on just about every conceivable social platform. Leave us a message with SpeakPipe. That's on our website, becauselanguage.com. You can also send us an email at hello@becauselanguage.com, just like Jenna and Linda did. Another thing you can do is tell a friend about us, because we like it when word of mouth happens. Word of mouth or word of sign. That's very good too. You can leave us a review in all of the reviewy places. iTunes is where a lot of people do, but don't neglect the pod format the podcatcher that you're on. Like Podchaser. It's very good.
Podchaser, I think, is just an app. It's just a place for reviews. Podcatcher is a name for all of your apps on your phone that can subscribe to podcasts.
That is correct.
Either way, leave us a review in lots of places. And if we spot the review and we like it, we'll probably read it out on the show like we have. We got a nice review from Hedwin on Twitter, who did a long review of all podcasts that relate to linguistics and English. And she said very nice things about us. And also, I think we share part of a name. So she was Hedwin, right? I'm right? And I think that's the same head as Hedvig. So I'm
the
placed.
fight battle?
Yeah. I don't know. I might look it up and be disappointed. But
Remind me, what are the bits? Because the head means battle and Vig means...
Battle.
Fight. Battle. So you're fighty fight girl. That's what you are.
There's slightly different kinds of... Like, one of them is more like a duel, and the other one is more like a battle.
So you're just kind of an all-rounder.
Apparently.
What about jousting?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I suspect that Gwen is the same one as in Gwen. Anyway, we'll find out. Maybe.
And
we'll see.
We'll Wendy.
See.
Yeah.
Maybe
okay.
Wendy.
Oh, Wendy is a completely concocted name from Peter Pan.
Yes, it is. J.M. Barrie made it up. But wouldn't we say that Gwendolyn, an older name, was inspiration for Wendy? Really?
No, it was based on Friendy Wendy.
Really?
Yeah, it was. Oh, she's my Friendy Wendy.
I had not heard that part of the story.
So
Thank you.
Strange.
See, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. Hedvig, I've got a Ben bit, but since Ben's not here, you want to take it from here?
Exactly. That's what I was trying to, but then you guys keep interrupting me.
Well, this Wendy thing is interesting.
This Wendy thing is interesting. We should stop talking over each other. I think listeners don't like that. Besides leaving a review in lots of places, you can support us by becoming a Patreon supporter on Patreon, and you'll become a patron on Patreon, which is a tongue twister. You'll get things like nice bonus episodes like the one you're listening to right now. You get to hang out with us on Discords, and you also get to sleep well at night knowing that you gave us money that made us be able to do nice things like pay speech docs to make transcripts so that you can search and read our shows. And we have a bunch of lovely people who have done so, including our lovely co-host of this show, PharaohKatt, but there are loads of other of our top patrons, and now I'm going to read out their names. Their names are Istin, Termi, Elias, Matt, Whitney, Helen, Jack, PharaohKatt, who's here, Lord Mortis, Garma Yen, Larry, Christopher, Andy B, James, Nigel, Meredith, Kate, Nasrin, Joanna, Aisha, Moe, Steele, Margaret, Manu, Roger, Rian, Colleen, Ignacio, Sonic Snedgehog, Kevin, Jeff, Andy from Logophilius, Stan, Kathy, Raj, Felicity, Amir, Kenny Archer, Tim, Alyssa, Chris, and now Lori, who has bumped up to the supporter level. We also want to welcome our special new listeners, new patrons at the listener level, Aliona and Annika. And we also have Jillian, who has bumped up to the listener level. Thank you to all of our wonderful patrons.
Our theme music has been written and performed by Drew Kaplianov, who's a member of Ryan Bino and of Didion's Bible. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Because language.
Pew, pew, pew! Well done.
Yay! That was great. Wow, there's a lot of news coming all the time, isn't there?
Yes. There's like 12 other articles I didn't send you because you were like, nope, we've got a run sheet. They just keep coming.
They just keep coming.
Yes.
And we'll be there on Because Language.